What's up, everyone? It is Bucky Brooks, and this is the Bucky Brooks Show. And I am excited because NFL training camps are underway. We have a lot to talk about. And today, I really want to focus on two of the marquee positions on the football field. We're in the scouting world. Everyone talks about pass rushers and then defensive playmakers, namely the cornerbacks. And in the last week, we have seen a lot of money kind of go out the doors to those positions. And I want to talk about how the big contracts that are now going to these primary positions, these premium positions, as we call it, will reshape the way the league is going and the after effects. What will be the long-term consequences or actions now that the dominoes have fallen for two of the marquee players, namely TJ Watt and Sauce Gardner. Let's start with TJ Watt. TJ Watt, look, former defensive player of the year, a guy who's been one of the more dominant players at the position, just got paid. The Pittsburgh Steelers signed him to a 3-year, $123 million extension, $41 million annual average, which puts him over top of Myles Garrett as the highest paid non-quarterback in the game. Remember, a few years ago, 2021, Pittsburgh made him the top paid non-quarterback back then, 4-year, $112 million. The thing about TJ Watt is dominant player. 73 and a half sacks over the last 5 years, most of any defender in football. He is a splash play maker, meaning he is always around the ball. He creates chaos off the edges, and his ability to create those splash plays, those negative plays, sacks, tackles for loss, turnovers, they really impact the game and help the Pittsburgh Steelers win at a clip. But it's uncommon for a team to give big money to a defender, a player rather, that's over 30 years of age, unless he's a quarterback. So the Pittsburgh Steelers go against the norms to give TJ Watt a contract, which we could deem to be a lifetime contract to finish his career as a Steeler. And they do it at a time where people are really trying to figure out how to operate in this new landscape when you're trying to build a team around quarterbacks, pass rushers, and defensive playmakers, which are cornerbacks. Here's what I like about this situation. I like that TJ Watt is a Steeler because, man, he represents the Steelers all the time. Dominant player, always brings the energy, but more importantly, the performance is always at a high level, particularly down the stretch when the Pittsburgh Steelers need it. When I think about face of the franchise type, TJ Watt is a face of the franchise for the Steelers because tough, hard-nosed, rugged, productive, kind of sets the tone for the defense with this playmaking ability. So I love all of that. Even though he's 31 years of age, I think he's certainly worthy of being paid and given that extension, given the impact that we've talked about. 73 and a half sacks, consistently being one of the more dominant players. He has been a defensive player of the year, and he probably should have won the award one or two more times based on what he's produced. But he is such a dominant player that still is needed to keep him in the fold, particularly when you have Aaron Rodgers coming in and they are making their quote-unquote playoff, their Super Bowl push. Now, can he get this defense to play at the level that they need to play at to help elevate Aaron Rodgers and that offense to a championship level? That's really what becomes key. Because when you're playing a defender, $41 million, those splash plays that we celebrate, they no longer become the occasional plays. They have to become the expected plays, meaning we expect to see that kind of performance each and every week. And in a 17-game season, you expect to see him register top numbers, 15 to 20 sacks, 5 or so forced fumbles, some interceptions, some game-changing plays. That now has to become the standard when we see TJ Watt weekly. So it changes a little bit of what they want to do. And the reason why it's really important is you're paying big money to TJ Watt. You're paying big money to Jalen Ramsey, who's in the back end. You have a big money free agent in Patrick Queen that you signed a year ago, who has to get up and going and playing at a dominant level. Championship defenses have dominant playmakers at all three levels. And when I'm looking at the three levels, Watt at the line of scrimmage, Queen at the second level, and now Jalen Ramsey, all the excuses are off for the Pittsburgh Steelers. But how does this deal impact the NFL landscape? Because when TJ Watt got his deal at over 30, it set the bar not only for pass rushers at 40 million plus a year, but it set the bar for the over 30 crowd. That now brings in the conversation with Trey Hendrickson. The Cincinnati Bengals, All-Pro, Pro Bowl standout, has been pining for a contract for 2 years. The things that have worked against him have been his age. You don't want to extend a 30-plus-year-old defender because you're anticipating he is now on the backside of his career. He's in the twilight of his career, and he is not going to be able to replicate the success that he has had over the last few seasons. Trey Hendrickson, over the last 4 years, has 57 sacks for the Bengals. He's consistently been in the double digits. He ranks right behind TJ Watt and Myles Garrett in terms of sacks over the 5-year period. Dominant player, and he's been dominant for the Bengals. He's a one-man show in Cincinnati, considering Sam Hubbard retired. You don't have Shamar Stewart in camp. It's going to be all on Trey Hendrickson. So the things that the Bengals could hold over his head in terms of being an older defender, not really wanting to give big money, not big money, but extra years to an older defender. Well, now that's out the window because when TJ Watt signs a 3-year deal at $40 million per, Trey Hendrickson is well within his right to ask for a 3-year deal that puts him close to that space. When you look at the numbers, and the numbers are what we do deals off of, you look at his numbers, and he's right there with Myles Garrett and Hendrickson, 2 guys that have over $40 million. Trey Hendricks has a great point to be like, hey, man, you're going to have to pay me what those guys are worth because my production, my performance is right on par with them. The challenge that you have if you're the Cincinnati Bengals, Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, when you made that commitment to make sure that Joe Burrow had the weapons, you now made it even more difficult to keep Trey Hendrickson in the fold at the number that he's going to command. Somewhere in this, the Cincinnati Bengals and Trey Hendrickson have to find that sweet spot. So while Trey Hendrickson may want the numbers and maybe fewer years or more years, whatever it takes to get him in that range, the Cincinnati Bengals now have to figure out, okay, if we don't want to give him 3 at 120, because that not puts us in another $40 million range when I have a quarterback making over 50, I have Jamar Chase making over 30, I got T. Higgins making a hefty sum. How can I build a team? That might require the Bengals to sign a longer deal that gives him his money maybe upfront in guarantees, but stretches it out. So for the salary cap, they're able to fit it in. But here's what I do know about the Cincinnati Bengals. Time is down. You got to pay him. And the longer they waited, the more they saw the price escalate. So now the Cincinnati Bengals are backed in a corner because TJ Watt got his deal done. And it makes it harder for them to say that, hey, we can't give a 30-plus-year-old defender the kind of money that he wanted, even though his production was on par with 2 of the best in TJ Watt and Myles Garrett. Here's the other domino that now falls, because everyone understands Trey Hendrickson is waiting on his deal because he's holding out. Micah Parsons is coming. And with Micah Parsons, you're talking about a guy who is a 4-time Pro Bowler, 2-time All-Pro player. Some would arguably say the best defensive player in ball, given his success for the Dallas Cowboys as a hybrid defender. He is at the time where they need to pay him as he goes into his 5th-year option on that deal. He has waited patiently and wisely to see what the marketplace would bear. Jerry Jones and the Cowboys are doing what the Cowboys normally do. They're notoriously dragging their feet to get this deal done. Well, by dragging their feet, they've given all the leverage to Micah Parsons in some capacity, because if Micah Parsons doesn't get this deal done, you're talking about the franchise tag and all that. The franchise tag is a hefty sum. You talk about the Cowboys and their star power in what is shaping up to be a team that is kind of going all in after you bring in George Pickens to go with CeeDee Lamb to help that offense elevate, to help Dak Prescott elevate. You have to make sure that your best defender is on the field. The guy that some would deem to be your second best defender, Trayvon Diggs, has injury issues. You paid him, but can he play to the level that you're paying him? You don't know. But the thing that we do know is pass rushers impact playmakers far more than playmakers impact pass rushers. So the guy who has to get paid as the centerpiece of the defense is Micah Parsons. How do we do it? How do we allocate the funds to give him his money? If I'm Micah Parsons' agent, I can't come in for $1 less than what TJ Watt had. I have to go over that. And maybe I have to go over that number by $500,000 annually, maybe $1 million annually. We're talking about 125 million on 3 or whatever that is over 5. We're at that mark. Jerry Jones certainly doesn't want to see a superstar leave the Cowboys. If they weren't going to pay him, then you probably should have traded him in the offseason and see what you can get back for him. Micah Parsons, 52.5 sacks, 9 forced fumbles, 4 fumble recoveries, 63 tackles for loss. He is the most impactful defender in ball. The Cowboys have to open up and break the bank to do it because, look, man, when you're the Cowboys are driven by their star power. And even though we haven't seen them compete in a Super Bowl in 25 plus years, they always are able to sell hope because they have enough stars to lure us in as fans to be like, you know what, this might be the year. The only way the Cowboys are ever going to have one of those years is Micah Parsons has to be leading the way. And so that means number 11 has to get his money. But it's about how much and when. I think it has to be done in camp. The Cowboys can't afford to go into the season, into next offseason without paying Micah Parsons. Because what we've seen from the position that the price tag only goes up, it never comes back down. Well, if that's the case, what would this look like? To me, I think Micah Parsons has to be a $200 million man. This has to be a 5-year deal. This has to be at over $40 million per. Talk about $41 million. This has to put him over that. You want to stretch it out over 5 years to give yourself an opportunity to build out a cap that'll work when you have a big money quarterback in Dak Prescott and you have CeeDee Lamb and George Pickens. It also puts the onus on the Cowboys to look at Dak Prescott differently. Because if 40 million plus is going to go to Micah Parsons and Dak Prescott still has to get paid because his contract is coming up soon, you have to make a hard decision on whether you truly believe that Dak Prescott can get you over the top. And so when we talk about the long-term consequences of these deals, particularly as the deal relates to the Cowboys, you now have to make a decision if you're Jerry Jones. Do I want the quarterback or the pass rusher? Because I may not be able to keep both. And if I go with the quarterback and lose the pass rusher, can I build a defense that's good enough to keep us over the top? So whether you like Dak Prescott or not, you're the Dallas Cowboys. You have to see if you have a viable opportunity, a legitimate opportunity to win the Super Bowl with a quarterback who hasn't proven to be able to get it done, even though I am a Dak Prescott fan. That's just the facts are the facts. Can you build a championship team around a defensive player, 2 pass catchers, and an unknown quarterback if you pay Parsons and you elect to walk away from Dak Prescott down the line? Those are the things that are impacting this decision that Jerry Jones has to make. So it's not just Micah Parsons in a vacuum like, hey, we want to pay him, we don't want to pay him. It's if we pay him, can we keep the quarterback? Because when the quarterback's deal comes up, he may go to the $60 million mark. And can I have $100 million committed to Dak Prescott and Micah Parsons and field a Super Bowl team? Probably not. That's why the decision that the Cowboys are making over the next few weeks is more of an indictment on Dak Prescott as opposed to Micah Parsons. This is fascinating to watch, and I can't wait to see how it plays out. But I do know this. If it's Micah Parsons, we're talking about $200 million. We're talking about a significant amount of money guaranteed. And we're talking about him coming over TJ Watt's deal at well over 42, 41, 41 and a half, $42 million. A lot of money for a player. But based on the numbers, the production, the resume, he has to get paid. But if he get paid, you may be saying bye-bye to number 4. Now, another thing that came up that doesn't have to do with TJ Watt specifically, but I found it interesting that on the eve of camp, George Karlaftis from the Kansas City Chiefs signs an extension, 4-year, $93 million to continue to be the sidekick to Chris Jones for the Kansas City Chiefs on the front line. To me, the deal makes sense because what I'm seeing is the Kansas City Chiefs on the front end of the negotiation, not on the back end. And the reason they're on the front end is George Karlaftis is only entering his 4th year in the league. 3 seasons, 24.5 sacks. He has been a nice compliment to Chris Jones. And what you like about him as a complimentary player to Chris Jones, the effort, the intensity, the motor, the production has been solid. What you're doing now by paying him early is you're getting in front of the market as opposed to behind the market. I just sat and talked about Micah Parsons and how they should have done this deal early, because now you run the risk of Micah Parsons costing so much that it impacts your quarterback. With Karlaftis, what the Kansas City Chiefs have done is they've enabled themselves to pay their guy, give him a deal that he can't refuse, while making sure that they always have enough money to pay Pat Mahomes. That's great strategy. That's great salary cap management, and is one of the reasons why the Kansas City Chiefs are always in the mix, because they do a really good job of managing their money situation. Also understand this, $23 million annually for a pass rusher, that is good work. We're talking about $40 million for the top guys. Karlaftis might not be a DPR number 1, but as a number 2, he's solid. $23 million for him is too much money to pass up, even though he's been a first-round pick. He could have rolled the dice and said if he could get into the $40 million category. But he said, give me a bird in hand that beats 2 in the bush. I'm going to sign this deal. And in signing the deal, I get my money now while helping my team use the money late. Kansas City Chiefs do a great job by signing their pass rusher, even though he's a compliment to Chris Jones, by setting the table so when Chris Jones moves on, they have someone in the fold to be able to build around. Good job by Brett Veach and company to get this done. Now let's go to the back end. Sauce Gardner. Last week, Sauce Gardner signed a 4-year, $120 million extension. Highest paid cornerback in the league. He's a guy who is a former defensive rookie of the year, 2-time All-Pro, all the things. The deal pushes him past Derek Stingley. But what it also does, it gives the Jets a centerpiece player. When we look up front, they have Quentin Williams. They have some other guys, Jermaine Johnson, others who can play. But they needed to have the number 1 guy in the back end. And the reason why this is important, because Aaron Glenn and the way that he wants to play, he wants to put a lot of pressure on Sauce Gardner and the corners to hold up in man-to-man. Sauce Gardner is one of the best players that we've seen in the league at snuffing people out. Those first 2 years in the league, he was terrific at eliminating balls to that side of the field. Fell off a little bit last year, but the skill set is there, the length is there, and more importantly, as a 24-year-old player with 2 All-Pros on his resume, you Bleav that he's going to be able to play at a high level for a long time. I would say the difference between him and Derek Stingley is his length, his athleticism, the feistiness that he plays with. He is always there, and he's not afraid of the smoke when it comes to matching up. In a defense that is increasingly relying on man-to-man to be able to neutralize opposing offenses, you had to get this guy in the fold. Sauce Gardner now has to take his game up a notch and maybe even do some of the things that elite corners do in terms of traveling, matching up, being able to move all over, to be the queen on the chessboard to set the table for this defense. In doing what they've done, the New York Jets, they've not only signed Sauce Gardner, but in signing him, it helped them make sure that they are together as a dominant defense. Meaning, we talked about championship defenses are dominant at 3 levels. And so Quentin Williams gives them a dominant defender at the point of attack. Sauce Gardner gives them a dominant player at the 3rd level. They now need to find that linebacker type. They had C.J. Mosley. C.J. Mosley retired, so now they have to find that linebacker that can be the impact player and the difference maker. But I do know this, if you can rush the passer and you can cover in this league, you can win a lot of games. And Aaron Glenn certainly understands that I have Quentin Williams on the inside. I want to make sure that I always have a legit high-end quarterback to be able to match up with some of the best wide receivers and quarterbacks in this game. So when you have a Sauce Gardner, it helps you deal with the quarterbacks in your division, and Josh Allen, Drake May, who's on the come, and Tua Tagovailoa, who's one of the more accurate passers in the league. But it also gives you a guy that can be an effective deterrent against the quarterbacks that are in the AFC that you know you're going to have to deal with as you face that gauntlet to become a title contender. We're talking about Josh Allen, Joe Burrow, Lamar Jackson, Justin Herbert, C.J. Stroud, and others. The more cover corners that you have, the more pass rushers you have, the better your chances of competing. Sauce Gardner being secured to a long-term extension ensures that the New York Jets can build a team brick by brick that can compete with the heavyweights. Now what we need to see is, can Sauce Gardner validate this contract by playing at a level that we haven't seen in New York since Darrelle Revis was one of those guys that we were talking about being a defensive player of the year. If Sauce Gardner can get to that level and bring the defense with him, we could see a team in New York surprise and emerge as a heavyweight in a league and a conference full of heavyweights on that side. That's the show for the day. We talked about the pass rushers. We talked about the premium positions at corner and how the money that is going to these guys is really going to impact the way we see the rest of the team building process unfold in the league, but more importantly, the way that teams elect to set their futures around these guys that are hitching their wagons to with the big money. Next time, maybe on Wednesday, we'll pod again. We'll talk about what is happening as training camps open up around the league, the movers and shakers, some of the news and tidbits. I'll have answers to some of your burning questions when it comes to that. Until next time, make sure you subscribe to the podcast. Make sure you check out all the things that we're doing on Bleav. Rate, review, subscribe, tell a friend to tell a friend as we get back at it as the season is here. Until next time, I'm Bucky Brooks. This is the Bucky Brooks Show. I will talk to you